until Sandro gets. Thank you. So he's already set up, but yeah, I haven't really said it so far. But the reason for these shorter slots is that when Sandro got longer slots, he scared us that everyone at the end was like just doing upgrades and not paying attention to other speakers. So not to induce too much like fear in us. I'm joking, but yeah, you probably know Sandro with the Vicious friendly scanner in the very old days of the voice over IP, doing security research, reporting to many projects, including Kamailio. Sandro, thank you for coming and for your work on securing, let's say, the open source side of telecom. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. So, yeah, I'm here to give an introduction to a new project of ours, DVRTC. Yeah, before I start, I should introduce that, yeah, I run a company called Enable Security, and we do penetration testing in voice over IP and WebRTC security. So, security testing of the sort of stuff that you guys like to build, or hate, I don't know, but, you know, like to build. So, this is the DVRTC introduction. And I have 2 demos, very short time. So I'm gonna rush through a little bit. Sorry about that. Let's start with the demo, because I guess, you know, that's what you're here for. That's what you would like to see. So I have a SIP to SQL injection or SQL injection in SIP demo to start with, and then I will explain why we're starting with that. So let's say you have a vulnerable Kamailio configuration, and essentially you have the user agent header, which is being, you know, used in an SQL, a SQL query. We're using the SQL_query function here in Kamailio configuration. You know, it's the backend is actually a MySQL. And you'll notice, yeah, if you generate an error, it's gonna at SQL level is going to give you SIP 500 response. We called it ouch here, but it could be, of course, anything. So if an attacker sends a single quote with in their user agent, the SIP message, which is attacker controlled, then they can break out of the SQL string, and you know, then they can append their own commands, SQL commands, and maybe you know, use stacked queries, and so on, with a semicolon, and so on and so forth. But instead of doing this manually as an attacker, you can also use open source tools like SQL Map. Now, SQL Map is a web application penetration testing tool. It's not really, doesn't know SIP at all. But SQL Map is an excellent tool for exploiting SQL injection vulnerabilities. It's really cool. It's, there's a lot of work that has been done in the past probably 20 years on SQL Map. So it's a tool that we can reuse if we have a SIP to HTTP sort of proxy. And that's what we have here. So we're going to have, in the demo, we're going to have a harness that translates HTTP requests into SIP register messages with crafted user agent headers, which allows us to use this excellent tool together with a vulnerable Kamailio configuration. Now, obviously, just keep in mind, this is not a built-in vulnerability in Kamailio, just, you know, for those people who might think so. And this is just a vulnerable configuration. Anyway, and the point of this tool is to be sort of an oracle to say, yes, the SQL query worked or not to SQL Map. I'll explain a little bit soon. Oops. So let's do the demo thingy. Mouse. And then, yeah, all right. So yeah, I'm going to check that DVRTC is working. It's a Docker Compose built thing. I'll be going into more details into this soon. And then we start a testing shell, which is, comes with the whole package. So the package has vulnerable and also testing tools. And we're going to start this SIP to HTTP tool harness, Oracle for SQL map, which starts an HTTP server locally. And then you can point SQL map to that HTTP server, and this HTTP server locally is talking to SIP. So the video is continuing, yeah. So yeah, that started in the background on a high port. And then we're going to dump the customers from the database. We're going to specify the database type, but SQL map is really cool because it does this pretty quickly, and it starts getting character by character from the database by using some, of course, it has a lot of tricks built into it. So to replicate SQL map is quite hard. Yeah. So once it gets all of that, where are we? No, where is he? Ah, yeah, okay. Going to skip to the end. All right, and at the end you get, the database dump, and this is very practical. It really works really well against web applications normally, but you could get it to work against SIP if there's an SQL injection vulnerability that is exploitable there. Now, let me switch back, if I can, to here. Okay. Now, and the way it's working is something like this. You have, this Boolean SQL injection tool that asks many yes and no questions. That's, essentially SQL map. And the harness makes each yes and no question travel through SIP via the user agent path, right? The user agent header. And the 500 responses are enough to tell if there's a database error or not, or the Boolean signal, essentially. And just, to remember how it looks like, the query looks like this. All right, now, this is something that we've seen in practical, pen tests, but why am I showing you this? Well, normally you would have to take my word for it, right? I would demonstrate this like I did last year and say, okay, don't do this, do this instead, right? But you have kind of no real way, no practical way to reproduce this for yourselves like easily, right? And this DVRTC is there to help with that. So it's public, the source code is available, you can go on GitHub and check it out, you can run it for yourself, you can, there's a public deployment as well, pbx1.dvrtc.net. So the whole idea is that it's intentionally unsafe. You should not run it on your, secure networks. Keep it isolated, ideally. But it allows you to see for yourself these sort of vulnerabilities, play with them, learn, and so on and so forth. So it's really, really cool to do. So what is the DVRTC? Well, the security community has kind of a lot of projects which are called Dem Vulnerable something. Dem Vulnerable Web Application is one of the most popular ones. A lot of people in the security community, cybersecurity community, have started their career learning from DVWA. the DEM vulnerable web application, for example, which is a set of PHP scripts, a web application. I don't remember exactly, but it might simulate a bank, a vulnerable bank, and you know, you're playing around with that. And the idea is that in voice over IP and WebRTC security, we didn't really have something reliable like this, and now we do. So that's what DVRTC is here for. It's a safe, reproducible target for real RTC attack practice. And PBX1 is we have different scenarios. So PBX1 is the first scenario that we have, and it includes Kamailio, of course. That's why we're here. There's PBX2 as well, but of course I'll be focusing on PBX1 in this case. So PBX1 stack consists of, you know, Kamailio. It's on the edge. There's also a WebSocket interface and so on. So there's various different interfaces. There you can test SIP TLS and so on and so forth. We try to support as much as possible on this architecture. Then there's Asterisk behind it, RTPEngine on the front as well, Cotern, MySQL on the back, and Nginx to help out with some vulnerabilities. And it's all running from Docker Compose, so you can, you know, just easily start it up. Yeah, so in terms of diagrams, we all love diagrams, right? Yeah, you have Kamailio on the front, but of course, even though Asterisk is behind Kamailio, keep in mind that, like in practice, a lot of traffic gets sent to Asterisk, and so just because Asterisk is not exposed, if there are vulnerabilities in your Asterisk configuration or version, they're going to be exposed probably at some point in time, you know, through some SIP messages, maybe behind authentication, but still, it could be a problem. Anyway, this is a pretty standard architecture, I think. You know, you'll see this in some shape or form in practice. In our work, we see this a lot. Now, how to run it? You get clone, and you run a few scripts to initiate certain variables that are necessary, but then you run the compose script with the scenario and tell it to go up, and that's basically it. We use Linux host networking and large UDP ranges, so we don't really support running it on Docker desktop on macOS or Windows. Use a Linux VM in some way. There's instructions in the documentation as well about this. All right, in terms of attack surface, the PBX1 supports roughly 12 exercises or 12 vulnerabilities. These are the signaling vulnerabilities that we have documented, and you know, they're there. And you know, you have the tools as well to test with them, right? With the whole project. So you have, it embeds SibVicious, it embeds some custom scripts that we developed quickly and VoIP coded essentially for the project. But they work reliably and they allow you to reproduce these issues. And there's also media security issues that are exposed here, things with RTP that you don't usually see so much talk about, apart from us. We're always very vocal on these things. And then there's the SIP to SQL that we saw, and turn relay abuse for WebRTC. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can reproduce here. So, all right, more demos, because that's what you're here for. So we started with the SQL injection, but yeah, we have a second demo, which is about the digest leak. Now, the idea is that the attacker can, without being man in the middle, without having, you know, sniffing the authentication mechanism, can force a UAC to send back the digest by authenticating to the attacker rather than to the normal server. And then we can crack that offline. We can use an offline password cracking attack. against that. So we have these different components. We have the victim UA, which is a bear SIP. It's all the time connected. So inside DVRTC, PBX1, it's all the time connected as extension 2000. What I mean by connected is registered, by the way. Sorry about that. And then you have an attacker tool that calls bear SIP through Kamailio by sending an invite to the SIP URI 2000. And then you have the victim bear SIP, which hangs up, sending a buy. It hangs up every 2 seconds, essentially, so that we can reproduce this within reasonable time. And then the attacker replies with a 407 asking it to authenticate. And the main problem is here, right? Kamailio is relaying the challenge and the digest response to that challenge back to the attacker. So the challenge from the attacker to the victim is being relayed from Kamailio because it's configured in that way. All right. And yeah, because you like diagrams, I'm sure, this is how it looks like. It makes it more clear. All right. Let's do this one. So full screen and play. So yeah, again, we check that everything is running and start the attacker shell. We have a testing shell and the attacker shell both have the attacker tools. And then we can use subvicious as VWAR to enumerate, just to show that the SIP extension 2000 is there. And then we're going to just use this tool, which does what we just described, right? So it just works, essentially. So yeah, it sends an invite. Then it gets answered by bear SIP. This is not a vulnerability in bear SIP, by the way, just to be clear, just in case there's some. And then bear SIP hangs up. And the tool sends a 407 proxy authentication required, which bear SIP is happy to oblige and then sends the proxy authorization header in the buy again, by sending it again, but with the header. And then we have this output for John the Ripper, which is a very, it's a tool that's been with the security community since forever. John the Ripper allows password cracking on the computer, offline, if you have a hash or a digest. And it cracks it very quickly, of course, because I just have a very short dictionary there. But yeah, it still is, even in practical terms, it would be, so if I stop it, it would be a very practical attack. It's relatively fast. All right, so let me see what I'm doing here. Okay, what's the reason for this? Essentially, the T relay over there forwards in dialogue responses, and this includes the external UA's digest challenge and the response. So, Kamailio authentication would not fix this as such. You could have, we didn't have authentication here for the incoming calls, but if you have authentication, you could still, if you have this sort of configuration, you could still have this sort of problem. And it's because Kamailio is, in this case, proxying, things. It's doing its job, but perhaps we should have a filter there to make sure external UACs are not challenging responses. All right, so what's next? Yeah, I mean, we have a second scenario with OpenSIPs, free switch, and RTP proxy for those people who want to play around with that sort of stack. But PBX1 is the most complete one so far. It comes from we've developed this actually like 5 years ago or more when we were working on Subvicious Pro and needed something to test against. But of course, this has been polished a lot. We hope to have a third scenario with WebRTC native scenario, probably with Janus. We're still working on it, or didn't really start so much. Homer integration would be cool for those nice diagrams that you might want to see. And I really like Homer 11 now. It looks like a good idea. And that could allow us to turn this into more of a honeypot sort of thing as well, at least for our own use. But yeah, contributions are, of course, welcome, issues, and new scenarios as well. What sort of attack paths do you see, in the wild on your systems or on your friends' systems? What would you like to see in practice to play around with in here as well? So, yeah. Maybe we have question time, I hope. And yeah, there's a QR code for a top secret URL full of resources related to this.
Until Yuri gets set up, Yuri, you got the microphone already?
Oh, and every month every month we issue a newsletter, the RTC Sec newsletter. It's unique in the industry because there's no security newsletter that covers WebRTC and voice over IP. So, please subscribe. It comes out every month, and people seem to like it, seem to read it.
Okay, so the winner for the question, it's even more questions than in the break.
Just one quick question. I was quickly looking at the repo, and I see that you already have, for example, for the PBX2, you already have the solutions and guidelines on how to solve. Now, will you do something similar to the Damn Vulnerable web app, where they just say what's available and then people have to work on their own to solve?
Yeah, we provided the exercises and you can follow through. I think, and I did that because I think it will help people learn better and quicker, sort of thing. While, there's so much information about web application hacking, right? But the voice over IP stuff, it's not well understood from a stack point of view. They might understand certain things like SQL injection, but yeah. So no, we're not gonna remove those exercises, I think, unless you're really asking nicely, but.
No, maybe you add more vulnerabilities, but no solution, so that they
right.
force themselves.
We could do that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sandro.
Thank
you. We are a bit tight on time, and I know many people want